Now you look as cheap as you really are." The words came with the cold splash of champagne, the sudden weight of it soaking through the blouse I had saved months to buy. I stood still, eyes locked on the man holding the empty glass. My son, Kieran. He didn't look away. In fact, he smiled. Beside him, his wife Malis threw her head back and laughed like it was the punchline of a good joke. A server rushed over offering a napkin I didn't take. My sister kept her gaze fixed on her water glass. No one moved. No one said a word. The dining room, dim and elegant, had gone silent in an instant. All around us, the rest of the table, friends, family people I had once believed loved me, pretended to busy themselves with cutlery or the edges of their menus. I could still hear the pop of the cork from 10 minutes earlier. Kieran had insisted on making the toast himself. To my mother, he had said, lifting his glass. Always overdressed and never quite invited. And then this. I took the napkin, but not for the mess. I needed something to do with my hands, while my mind stood perfectly still. The silk clung to me, transparent now, the champagne seeping cold against my skin. I had planned this dinner for 3 weeks, reserved the room, arranged the flowers, even paid the deposit for the custom cake. Every detail had been mine. Every cost had been mine. He couldn't have done this without planning it. I nodded slowly, then smiled the way I used to smile when Kieran was little and caught lying about something small. Calm, controlled, and very far from naive. "It's fine," I said softly. "Let's continue." I sat down and finished the rest of my water. I said nothing else through dessert. When the cake arrived, someone else blew out the candle before I could. At home, I peeled the silk blouse from my skin and threw it straight into the trash. Then I reached for the binder on my desk. I didn't bother turning on the lights when I stepped into the house. The dark felt honest. I moved through it with muscle memory, pausing only when I reached the bedroom. The silk blouse was still clinging to me, cold and sour with the smell of champagne. I peeled it off slowly, the wet fabric resisting at the shoulders, and dropped it into the trash without folding it. The closet door clicked as I opened it. I changed into something plain cotton dry, not meant to impress anyone, and sat at my desk. The binder was still where I had left it last month, tucked neatly beneath a stack of expired catalogs and a photo frame I hadn't looked at in years. I pulled it forward and opened it to the first tab: assets. Kieran's name wasn't on a single deed, not legally. The condo he and Malis lived in had been mine since 1996. I had allowed them to move in 6 years ago, just until they got on their feet. I paid the property taxes each year. I paid the HOA fees, the next tab vehicles, the Lexus registered under my name. I paid the insurance quarterly. Malis had once referred to it as her push present in front of her friends. There was no child, only entitlement. Credit cards 3, 2 for me, 1 for emergencies, an extra card linked to my account, handed over to Kieran when he was still married to his first wife. It was never returned. The statement last month showed a $1,300 charge for a hotel in New York and a shopping receipt from a boutique I couldn't pronounce. They took and I gave. That part was true. But what they didn't understand was that I gave because I believed in family, because I thought someday it would circle back in love, not in cost. I stared at the account summary, the red numbers where there should have been balance, the absence of boundaries in every line item. The champagne had dried on my skin, but the insult hadn't faded. This wasn't the first stain, just the final one. I flipped to the next tab and saw the email that started it all. By morning, my name had already become a joke. I woke to a notification I hadn't asked for, one of those automatic alerts from an app I rarely used. Malis had posted a reel. I didn't intend to watch it. I should have just deleted the thing. But my thumb hovered, then tapped. The video was less than 15 seconds. A slow pan of the restaurant from last night cut to a close-up of a champagne glass being tipped, clearly staged, a recreation. Then came her voice, smug and syrupy. When trash dresses up. Still trash. The screen cut to her and two of her friends laughing on a couch. I didn't recognize the others, but Kieran had liked the post. I saw his name listed beneath a line of heart emojis. I saved the video, downloaded it directly to my phone. Then I turned off the sound. Opening my laptop, I returned to the binder and the stack of flagged emails I hadn't fully dealt with. One caught my eye, a message from someone named Julian Teague. His subject line, refinance confirmation documents, Valore Beach property. At first I thought it was spam, but the property number matched. I read the email twice before my eyes settled on the words, as signed under your standing POA agreement. I hadn't signed anything in years. The attached document was there. Melissa's handwriting, unmistakable forged signature, neat, but not mine. She had used a copy of the durable power of attorney I had once issued temporarily when I had surgery. I never revoked it in writing, assuming it would expire on its own. They had used it to refinance the beach condo. The loan had cleared. $87,000 drawn against my name. Not a gift. Not a discussion. Not even a heads up. The same woman who laughed out loud when her husband dumped champagne on me had quietly leveraged my property to fund a lifestyle. And Kieran, he had to know. There was no way she could have done that alone. I scrolled back to the reel one more time. They were laughing too loud for people who hadn't paid for a single thing they lived in. I closed the window and opened a new one, my lawyer's contact page. The lawyer called back that afternoon. I didn't answer right away. I needed to breathe before I spoke to anyone in authority, even one on my side. I walked the length of the hallway twice, then sat at the kitchen table with the binder open and a pen in hand. There were red flags everywhere. Transaction statements, documents altered without my consent. But it wasn't just the theft that sat heavy on my chest. It was the certainty that they believed I wouldn't do anything about it. They thought I was too soft, too sentimental. Maybe I had been. But memory has a way of waking up when you least expect it. I thought of Isla. She wasn't my granddaughter. Not even my niece by blood, not exactly. Isla's mother was my niece, the daughter of my late cousin. But we'd always been close. When her heart failed suddenly on a flight, Isla was just 12. That summer, I brought Isla to stay with me for a while. She started calling me Aunt Sarah then, and the name stuck. It didn't matter that our family ties were once removed. What mattered was that she came and stayed when no one else did. She hadn't grown up in wealth. She never expected anything. When I'd been hospitalized last year after a fainting spell, Kieran hadn't come until the third day. Melis never came at all, but Isla. She showed up the next morning holding a bundle of tulips so tightly the stems were crushed. She didn't ask what I needed. She asked how I felt. She stayed for 2 hours, never once looking at her phone. I didn't cry when she left, but I remember feeling seen. I pulled out the documents I hadn't looked at in nearly 4 years. My will, my advance directives, the trust account paperwork. The pen didn't hesitate. Kieran would receive nothing beyond what he already had, which would soon be gone. Melis would be removed from every authorized document. The trust, the properties, the rights to all family holdings would pass to Isla upon my death. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because she had already given me something they never did time without agenda. I slipped the signed pages into a new folder and slid it into my bag. Tomorrow, I would make the rest official. The first call came at 7:51 a.m. Why is the card declined? I'm at the salon. Melissa's voice was sharp, unfiltered by pleasantries. I could hear the background buzz of blow dryers and shallow chatter. I pressed the phone to my ear for a moment longer than necessary before answering. The card no longer exists. There was a pause, the kind that happens when someone's brain scrambles to rewrite their reality. Then a sharp inhale. I hung up before she could respond. At 9:03, I received a text from the vehicle management company. The Lexus had been successfully retrieved from the downtown parking structure. The key fob had been disabled remotely. Melis wouldn't be driving it home. By 11:47, the leasing office called. They wanted to confirm that Kieran's corporate apartment would not be renewed for the next cycle. I told them the lease wasn't to be transferred either. Terminate as scheduled, I said, then thanked them by name. It felt good to remember that I had put everything in place quietly, legally, deliberately. My phone lit up repeatedly. Kieran's name appeared more than once, alternating with a blocked number I suspected was Melis borrowing someone else's line. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened my bank app and reviewed the notifications: automatic drafts, canceled credit lines frozen, and the emergency card closed for good. I took a long breath. Not because I was nervous, but because this was the first morning in years where my boundaries had weight behind them. They hadn't expected me to act. They thought I would cry, complain, or write a careful email full of guilt. They'd forgotten that the same woman who raised a child alone, held 2 jobs, and still managed to keep a home running, didn't rely on their approval. She relied on her own grit. The silence I gave them now wasn't passive. It was a message. Let them spin in their confusion. Let them guess. Let them call each other and ask what changed. I had more important calls to make. And one of them was to Isla. He didn't knock. He pounded. I was already at the window when I saw his car come to a stop, crooked across the edge of my driveway. Kieran didn't wait for permission. He stormed up the path like a man who believed the house still belonged to him. "You're ruining my life," he shouted, the second I opened the door. I didn't respond right away. I stepped aside just enough to let the sunlight fall across the hardwood floor, but not enough to invite him in. He pushed forward, but I held my ground. "You can say what you need to from there." His face was flushed, half from rage, half from panic. "They towed our car. The cards are dead. The condo lease is gone. You can't just do this." I reached into the side table drawer and pulled out the folder I had prepared 2 nights ago. It wasn't thick, but it didn't need to be. Inside was a printed copy of the refinance loan documents, highlighted with the forged signature circled in red ink. Next was a screenshot of Melis's Instagram reel timestamped. Finally, a transcript of the audio from the video she thought would vanish after 24 hours. I handed it to him slowly. "You did that without shame," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm only doing this with clarity." He didn't look at the contents. He just stared at me as if he couldn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. The woman who had once baked him cakes, driven him to interviews, given him a credit card when he couldn't afford lunch. "I'm your son," he said like it still meant something. I nodded. "And yet you signed off on stealing from me." He opened the folder. His hands were shaking. "I don't want this to be permanent," he said, his voice softer. Now calculated. "We can fix it." "You already tried to fix it," I said. "You fixed it for yourselves. I'm just undoing the damage." He stood there waiting for me to change my mind. But I was already reaching for the envelope in the drawer labeled Trust Revision, Isla. The voicemail came in at 10:12 p.m. I let it play twice before deleting it. "Cerintha, I'm saying this with care." Melis began, her tone syrupy with practiced restraint. "You're clearly confused. I know this isn't you. This isn't who you were with Kieran. We all say things we regret, but what you're doing, it's extreme. Vindictive. Honestly, it's starting to seem a little unstable." She didn't mention the forged loan or the post mocking me in front of strangers. She didn't mention the years I carried them. She never would. I didn't call back. I didn't need to. By noon the next day, I was sitting in a cool, quiet office, signing what should have been signed years ago. The revised trust was straightforward. All assets, real estate accounts, and investments would be transferred to Isla's name upon my death. Not conditional, not shared. Hers. A clause was added meticulously worded to block Kieran from contesting the change. Any legal challenge from him would nullify his claim entirely. Not that he had any left. The final addition was one I hadn't planned until the moment I felt the pen in my hand, a letter addressed to the extended family. Polite, measured, but honest. I told them what had happened. Not the gossip version. Not the dramatized spin Malis was surely floating already. Just the facts. That my property had been refinanced without consent. That my name had been dragged through digital mud while I paid their bills. That I had chosen not in anger, but in self-respect, to stop giving to those who gave nothing back. The letter would be mailed along with the formal notice of trust changes. I reviewed each page before slipping the documents into the envelope and sealing it. "Do you feel settled with this?" the lawyer asked, voice low. Cautious. "No," I replied, "but I feel finished." Outside, the sun had shifted across the pavement. I walked slower than usual, not from doubt, but from release. I had more to do, of course, some practical, some symbolic. But tonight, I would eat dinner without interruption. The stew simmered low on the stove as I folded 2 cloth napkins and placed them beside the mismatched bowls. I hadn't hosted anyone in months, not since I stopped pretending holidays needed to be performed. But tonight felt like something different. Not a celebration, not a gesture, just a return. Isla arrived on time coat damp from the drizzled cheeks, pink with wind. In her hands was a small envelope creased at the corners. "I didn't know what to bring," she said, "so I wrote something." She placed it beside my plate and sat down. Inside was a card with no printed message, only handwriting large, uneven, a little rushed. "Thank you for seeing me." That was all it said. And somehow, it said everything. We didn't talk much at first. The stew filled the quiet, rich and heavy with root vegetables, simple. I poured us both a glass of water. No wine, no ceremony. Just 2 people eating, grateful not to be alone. Isla told me about her job, how she was helping catalog a local museum's archive. It wasn't glamorous, but she lit up when she talked about the process. The preservation. She didn't ask for anything. She never had. I watched her hands as she spoke, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she got nervous. She had grown so much since I last really looked at her. A woman now. Whole and real. Somewhere in the middle of dinner, I felt something shift. Not in her, in me. I had spent months believing I'd lost something. That by drawing a line with Kieran, I had given up family. But across the table sat someone who had never expected my money, never used my name, never asked me to prove I mattered. She just stayed. When we finished, she stood to help with the dishes. I waved her off. "You came. That's enough." She hugged me goodbye without hesitation, then disappeared into the early evening. I washed the bowls in silence, not lonely, just full. Tomorrow, the first sale from the condo would clear. The wire transfer arrived at 8:06 a.m. sharp. The beach condo, once their weekend boast, their selfie backdrop, their bargaining chip, was no longer theirs. It was never really theirs at all. I had already chosen where the money would go. The scholarship fund didn't have my name on it. That was intentional. It was meant for first-generation college students, the ones who worked 2 jobs and still showed up to class exhausted but determined. The ones who reminded me of who I had been long before property titles and signatures were used as weapons. I sent the check with a note. No acknowledgments necessary. Just keep the door open for someone else. The main house deed was next. I met with my attorney one last time and moved it fully into the trust. Isla would inherit it without delay, without red tape, and most importantly, without contest. The language was ironclad now. That same afternoon, Kieran filed a formal complaint. Some vague claim about mental coercion and elder confusion. It didn't hold up. My attorney had already anticipated it and attached documentation, dated revisions, witness statements, and unfortunately for him, the very messages he and Melis had sent in the weeks prior. Dismissed. Swiftly. Then came Melis. She left a voicemail dripping with performance. I will go public if I have to. You don't want this kind of embarrassment, Cerintha. But she had underestimated the bank. They'd already submitted evidence copies of the forged documents' IP logs, phone call recordings, authorizing the $87,000 refinance. They were no longer on my side, they were on the side of legal preservation. I never heard from her again. By Thursday, my porch had turned warm again. I carried the newspaper outside, sat with my legs tucked up beneath me, and read through stories that had nothing to do with me. No court summons, no drama, no calls, just space. In the margins of the paper, I circled an ad for a gallery exhibit 2 towns over. Something quiet. Something new. I folded the page, pressed it flat, and set it beside the card Isla had left behind. I turned 67 today. No reservations, no grand dining room. Just a quiet corner table at a cafe I'd passed for years, but never entered. The air smelled of baked things and cinnamon, and the morning crowd had already thinned. I ordered a coffee and took out a book, not because I expected to read much, but because the weight of it made the table feel like mine. A server approached near midday, balancing a small plate in her hands. On it sat a single cupcake, vanilla pale frosting, 1 candle already lit. This from you? I asked gently. She smiled and nodded toward the far window. Isla was waving 2 tables over. She didn't walk over, didn't make a scene. She simply lifted her mug in a quiet toast. I returned it. The flame flickered before I blew it out. I didn't make a wish. I didn't need to. A year ago, I might have spent this day grieving, blaming myself, wondering what I had done so wrong to be treated that way by my own son. Now the silence feels like an open field. I can walk through it, breathe in it. I don't mistake it for absence anymore. I see it for what it really is, space I reclaimed. My phone buzzed in my purse. I didn't need to look, but I did. Kieran. A message preview flashed across the screen. No subject, just his name. I swiped it away without opening it. Whatever he needed now, whatever apology he might have learned to shape it, was too late. Not out of spite. Just truth. He had spoken his version of me into the world. Now I had written my own. I reached for the fork and took the first bite of the cupcake. It wasn't about sweetness. It was about choice. Outside, the breeze shifted. I watched Isla stand and head for the door, glancing back just once to make sure I saw her go. I did, and I stayed.